that does something for you. As I wind this up, I want to reiterate to you, members of this brigade of midshipmen, soon to be fellow alums of this beloved alma mater of mine, that my idea has not been to give a pep talk, but give you a heads up. Information that every military leader should have filed away about the depth and power and mystery that pervade that precious few who are always here in this great naval service of ours, and just might wind up under your command. I don't think I have to labor the obvious. You know from common sense that you're going to have to, what you have to say, the ordinary bloke, to get him to charge will put these people in orbit. You got to have a sensitivity for this. Their understandable impulsiveness and extraordinary conscientiousness require your best and special counsel in dangerous times, and your protection against their squandering themselves on efforts that are not worthy of them. To where have I come? My heroes, from Mad Jack to Jack Broughton to the Alcatraz Gang to Congressional Medal of Honor Society to Don Quixote, all took action to try to make the world meet their standards. They took on the status quo. Seldom were they organization men. By that I mean acting a part that would normally be expected of a person, the best sort of person, trying to do a good job appropriate to his duly appointed duties on the slot in the organization chart. Hardly any of them performed any heroic acts in behalf of their organization as such. The organization was only incidental. This may not sound good, but this is the way I see it. What they did in behalf of their conscience. They were outside the organization game. Many came onto the stage from the wings, performed brilliantly, performed briefly, albeit brilliantly, and then disappeared into the wings. They performed their best outside the law, in the realm of stark individuality. I don't mean illegally, I mean extra-legally, beyond the law. Maybe not too far from Aristotle's idea. Somewhere between the gods and the humans. Know they're there. That's the message tonight. Thank you, and I'll take questions.
Admiral Stockdale will take questions now from the midshipmen, and so if you'll make your way to one of the microphones, we'll take questions. While he's doing that, I'm sure the midshipmen will be interested in knowing that Admiral Stockdale is a member of the class of 1947, played football at the Naval Academy, and was a member of the Forensics and Debating Society. He was, according to his classmates, what was known as a hard case. You make your own judgment on that. I must share with you a story that Admiral Holloway shared with me tonight, that when he heard, when a former commanding officer that both he and Admiral Stockdale had shared heard that Admiral Stockdale had been shot down and taken prisoner, he said, the North Vietnamese are going to be sorry they got him. And I think you see tonight why that is the case. And now we'll take some questions from the midshipmen. We have one right back here. Go ahead.
Sir, Midshipman First Class Average. Sir, as plebes in naval leadership, we read that, paraphrase, you once said, the plebe system is what helps you get through your years as a POW. Well, I've had a sponsor from the class 61, and the Deputy Don also has told us many stories about how seriously physical the plebe system was. And judging by the plebe system I undertook, do you think that the plebe system now still prepares midshipmen for this type of situation?
I'm not, I'm not well informed, but it's not the viciousness of the system that gives you the impetus. It's the ability to have had some experience in being harassed and to be able to stand up under criticism. there are a lot of people out there who have never really sat down and had somebody chew them out. And that's a rude shock when they get in certain circumstances, and the prison is one of the worst. I lived in a cell one time, if some of you read the book, with a guy who had never, I said to him, not all need it, but I said, what you lack is a plebe year. He really could not stand to be harassed. And it was more a mental problem than a physical problem. You know, I got my papers out here. I think I don't need to look at them because I thought maybe a plebe question would come up. There's a guy named Roger Hillsman who was in the Kennedy administration. He's a West Pointer. He comes off as kind of a milquetoast guy politically, but he was a West Pointer, and he fought in some behind-the-lines operations in World War II, and he talks in this autobiography about how he didn't really like plebe year, as you might not think he would, but he said that he couldn't. He's a very, brainy guy, and he said, people say you go through plebe year so you'll obey orders. And he said, I never got the connection. But then he tells a kind of an interesting, I could read it to you. It's in this book that he recently wrote. He tells, it just pops out of it. He's wounded behind enemy lines, and for the first time he realizes that he's panicking because he's bleeding and he's surrounded, and there's these little 3 or 4 guys against a bunch of them. And then he said, I've got to control this panic. I cannot just flail. And then he said, I realized that, where did I learn that? He said, I learned that plebe year. And he talked about some kind of drill they used to have where they had to change uniforms every 2 minutes or something. And if you really lost the balloon, you were dead. But he said, I realized that when I was there in this trench with a hole in my back and gasping for air and getting scared, I realized that the thing that saved me was that memory of that cruise box race or whatever it was. That's what we'd call them when I was here, that he used to go through. Well, that's kind of an authentic certification of it. And I don't think you can just take plebe year and take, the brawny details are so secondary to the what goes on in the person's head. People, when I was president of the Citadel, I was not opposed to physical hazing. That is really not half as dangerous to a person emotionally and in the long run as mental hazing. And so I think a little of both does you some good, but you can get a lot of good out of that mental side. Okay.
Class of 94. Class 94 can expect a few more uniform races tonight, I think, Admiral, as a result. We have a question up here, right up here, corner.
Sir, Midshipman First Class Falcone, during the Vietnam War, you and many other prisoners of war were constantly threatened by the North Vietnamese with the fear of being tried as common criminals in the Vietnamese courts, since they claimed that the United States was not officially at war due to the failure of our government to formally declare war against North Vietnam. With respect to this and the many other flagrant violations of the 1949 Geneva Conventions by the North Vietnamese, especially those concerning the treatment of POWs, why hasn't Congress gone through the formality of officially drafting a declaration of war against Iraq, although not required under the 1949 conventions, simply to guarantee that all those Allied prisoners of war will have the maximum chance of being guaranteed of proper treatment under those conventions, sir?
Well, I'm very much, one of my only hang-up about this Gulf thing, as it brewed up, was I really wanted the Congress to go on record in favor of it, because when we were in prison, at least we were hearing broadcasts from some congressmen that were more vicious against the United States government than we would have ever said without being tortured. So I wanted them to come aboard, and I mean, you cannot draw the, I think they've done it. I think that happened. I left what they got out of the Congress, a majority vote. It's never been, you know, laid down in any sort of constitutional terms what the ratio of the majority, what actually constitutes the right number to be. But both houses acceded to the action that the president asked, and I mean, I consider that a victory for our side. And I don't think you can go on with it. So then I think things are looking good here.